This is my true story. I had no one left in my life after my son abandoned me. I thought my days would end in silence until I met a small orphan girl at a shelter. Lost, thin, scared, with eyes too old for her age. Something about her gaze pulled at something deep inside me. I didn't know then that she would become my whole world. I didn't know that one photograph in her hands would one day shatter everything I believed. Before I tell you what I saw, tell me where you're watching from, and please subscribe so my story can reach others. The beginning. I first met her on a cold afternoon at a local shelter. I wasn't supposed to be there that day. I had gone to drop off some old clothes and food, just something to do to fill the quiet hours. The place smelled of old wood and damp air. Children ran around, some laughing, some silent. But she sat in the corner, away from the others, her knees pulled to her chest, her face half hidden behind her arms. She looked small, too small for 12. Her hair was messy, her clothes too big, her eyes empty. When I looked into those eyes, something inside me stopped. I didn't know why, but she looked familiar. Not her face, not her voice, but the sadness in her eyes. It was a sadness I had seen before, long ago, in someone I loved. She didn't talk much. The staff said she had been there for months. No family, no visitors, no one coming to take her home. They said she was shy, didn't like to play, didn't smile, barely spoke a word. I asked what happened to her parents, but they said no one knew. Just another lost child, they said. I couldn't stop thinking about her. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I kept seeing her sitting in that corner, small and quiet, like the world had already given up on her. I told myself it was just pity, that I was only an old man trying to fill his loneliness. But it wasn't pity. It was something else, something deeper that I couldn't explain. The next week, I went back to the shelter. I told myself it was to donate again, but my heart knew the truth. I wanted to see her. She was sitting in the same spot, the same way, as if time hadn't moved. I brought her a small chocolate bar. She didn't take it at first. She just looked at me, her eyes sharp and unsure. Then, slowly, she reached out, took it, and nodded. No smile, just a nod. It was enough. I went back the week after that, and the week after that. Every time she was there, always quiet, always alone, but each time she looked at me a little longer, like she was trying to figure out if I was real. I started bringing her small things, books, shoes, food, things I thought she needed. She never asked, but she always accepted, quietly, politely. Once, she tried to give the shoes back, saying they were too new. I told her to keep them. She hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was so soft I almost didn't hear it. But that one word stayed with me all day. It was the first sound of trust I had heard in years. I didn't have anyone left. My house was empty. The silence had been my only company since my son threw me out of his life. I thought I was done with love, done with family. But that little girl changed something in me. Every visit to the shelter became the only thing I looked forward to. She began to look for me too. I'd walk in and see her head lift, her eyes searching the doorway. She wouldn't run or shout, but she'd stand a little straighter, like she knew someone had come just for her. I started helping around the shelter, fixing things, repairing furniture, cleaning. They let me stay longer, and slowly, she started to open up. She began to draw. Mostly quiet pictures, a small house, a tree, sometimes a man standing under the sun. I asked who he was, and she shrugged. I never pushed her. I knew what it meant to have memories that hurt too much to speak about. Months passed like that. Each week, she grew a little brighter. She started to eat more, talk more, even laugh sometimes. The sound of her laughter was small, broken, but real. It filled the empty spaces in me I thought were gone forever. The shelter staff noticed it too. They said she smiled more when I was there. I didn't know what to say. I just knew that when I looked at her, I didn't see a stranger anymore. I saw a child who needed someone, and maybe I needed her just as much. Something about her never stopped pulling at me. The shape of her eyes, the tilt of her head, the way she looked at me when she was thinking. It all felt too familiar, too close. But I didn't question it. I told myself it was just age, that she reminded me of my younger days, of my family, of the people I had lost. I didn't know then that life was preparing to show me the cruelest truth I would ever face. I started visiting her every week. It became part of my life, something I couldn't skip no matter how tired I was. The people at the shelter began to notice too. They smiled when I came, like they already knew who I was there for. I didn't come with big gifts or money. I brought small things, books, fruit, sometimes new shoes or a warm sweater when the weather turned cold. I didn't want her to feel like a charity case. I just wanted her to feel like she mattered to someone again. She never asked for anything, but I could tell she needed everything. Her clothes were always too thin, her shoes too tight, her hands always cold. But her eyes began to change. They were no longer empty. They started to hold light again, small but real. The first time she smiled at me, it felt like the sun had come back after years of darkness. It wasn't a big smile, not the kind you see in pictures. It was small, shy, fragile, but it was everything. That one smile was worth more than anything I owned. I didn't tell her, but I went home that night and cried. I cried because I realized I hadn't seen that kind of innocence in years. The world had taken everything from me. My son, my home, my peace. And here was this little girl giving me something back I didn't even know I'd lost. The staff at the shelter said she had started eating better, talking more, even helping the younger kids. They said she was changing. I knew why. She finally had someone to wait for, someone who saw her. I came every week without fail. I'd sit with her in the corner and read to her from old storybooks. She liked listening more than reading. She would rest her chin on her knees and listen like every word mattered. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me, not the book. I'd ask her what she was thinking, and she'd just shake her head. I didn't push. Months passed, and we became inseparable. The staff started calling me her grandfather. I didn't correct them. I liked the sound of it. It made me feel alive again. When they saw how close we were, they said I could take her out sometimes. Short walks, visits to the park, small things. I promised to bring her back every time. And I did. She loved the park. She'd sit on the swings, not moving much, just watching the children play. She didn't play with them. She said she liked watching. She said it made her happy just to see others laugh. That broke me a little every time. I remember one Sunday when it started to rain suddenly. We ran for cover under a tree, and she laughed, really laughed, for the first time. I had never heard her laugh like that. It was light, pure, full of life. I just stood there watching her, my clothes soaked, my heart full. I hadn't felt that kind of warmth in years. The rain didn't matter. Nothing did. Soon, I started bringing her home for weekends. The shelter allowed it after seeing how careful I was. I made her favorite food, simple things, rice and curry, sweet bread, fruit. She would sit at my old table, legs swinging, eyes bright, eating like it was the best meal in the world. The house that had once been silent now had laughter again. She liked helping in the kitchen, though she made a mess of everything. She said she wanted to learn, and I taught her, the same way I once taught my son when he was little. Sometimes I caught myself watching her too closely, not out of worry, but out of wonder. There was something about the way she smiled, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. It was familiar, haunting even. But I brushed it off as coincidence. The staff saw how close we had become. They said she had never connected with anyone before, like she did with me. They said I had given her something they couldn't, a sense of belonging. They asked if I wanted to become her foster parent. I didn't even have to think about it. I said yes. The paperwork took time, but finally, they said I could bring her home. I remember that day clearly. She stood beside me, holding my hand tightly as we walked out of the shelter. She didn't cry. She didn't look back. She just held my hand and said nothing. That night, she slept in her own bed for the first time. I stood at the doorway for a long time, watching her breathe, her small chest rising and falling. I felt something break inside me, not from pain, but from peace. I hadn't felt that kind of quiet joy in decades. She called me uncle at first. It felt warm. But one morning, months later, she looked up from her cereal and said "Dad" instead. My heart stopped. I didn't correct her. I couldn't. The word hit me so hard that I had to turn away so she wouldn't see the tears. In that moment, I wasn't a lonely old man anymore. I was someone's father again. The years passed quietly, one after another. Life slowed down, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't mind it. The house that used to echo with silence was now full of sound, her small footsteps, her laughter, her voice calling out from another room. I would wake up early and hear her humming in the kitchen, trying to make breakfast, always burning the toast. She said she wanted to learn to cook like me. I let her try, even when she made a mess. Watching her learn, watching her grow, it gave me something to live for again. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to care for until she came into my life. She was smart, curious, kind. Every evening we sat together at the table. I helped her with homework, explained things slowly, and she listened with full attention. When she didn't understand, she frowned, bit her lip, and tried again until she got it right. That determination reminded me of someone, but I didn't say it aloud. Sometimes she'd fall asleep at the table, her head on her notebook, and I'd carry her to bed. Her small hand would clutch my sleeve even in her sleep, as if afraid I'd disappear. I never let her go. On weekends, we cleaned the garden together. She loved planting flowers. She said they made the world softer. Every time a flower bloomed, she'd smile proudly, as if she'd created life itself. That smile could melt the hardest stone. It became the center of my days. Every night I prayed quietly that nothing would take that smile away from her. Not life, not fate, not the cruel world outside our door. We made small traditions together. Every Sunday we'd walk to the market. She'd pick fruits while I haggled with the shopkeepers. Every birthday I baked her a small cake. The first time I did it, she cried. She said no one had ever celebrated her birthday before. She didn't even know the exact date, so we chose one, the day she came home with me. From then on, it became our day. Every year, we'd light a candle, and she'd make a wish. I never asked what she wished for. Some things are meant to stay quiet. As she grew older, she started calling me Dad. The first few times, it was soft, unsure, almost like she was testing the word. But later, it became natural, like it was always meant to be. I never told her not to. That word healed something inside me I thought would never mend. I used to be just an old man waiting for life to end. Now, I had a reason to wake up every morning. She filled the emptiness my own blood had left behind. But life has a cruel way of reminding you that peace doesn't last forever. There were small things, tiny moments that made me pause. The way she smiled sometimes, the way she laughed, the way her eyes lit up when she was excited. I couldn't explain it, but something about her felt familiar, like I had seen those expressions before. Sometimes I'd look at her face and feel a sharp ache in my chest, a memory trying to surface but never fully appearing. I brushed it away, telling myself it was just age, just my mind playing tricks. Years rolled by like quiet waves. She grew into a beautiful young woman, strong, graceful, with a heart full of kindness. Everyone who met her said she was special. She had a way of making others feel seen, loved, important. I watched her help neighbors, feed stray dogs, care for the sick. She said I taught her that love was something you give, not something you expect back. But she didn't know that she had taught me the same thing. Sometimes at night, I'd sit alone in the garden and think about my life, the son I lost, the years of loneliness, and now this miracle of a child who came from nowhere and gave me back my will to live. I wondered if fate had sent her to me as a second chance, as a quiet way of saying that love still existed, even after everything. The seasons changed, and she stayed. She became my family, my light, my everything. The thought of losing her frightened me more than death itself. I told myself I'd protect her no matter what. I didn't know then that she would be the one to protect me. Not from the world, but from a truth I never saw coming. As she grew older, the questions began to come slowly, quietly, like drops of rain before a storm. She would ask simple things first: where she was born, who brought her to the shelter, why no one ever came for her. I would answer the ones I could, and for the rest, I'd just say, some wounds take time to heal. She didn't press me much then. Maybe she saw the way my eyes changed every time she mentioned her parents. Maybe she felt that some answers hurt too much to chase. But she was growing, and curiosity is a fire that never dies once it starts burning. Sometimes, at night, she'd sit beside me in the garden, quiet, thoughtful. The moonlight would fall across her face, and she'd stare at the sky for a long time before speaking. "Do you think my parents loved me?" she'd ask softly, almost as if she didn't want to hear the answer. My throat would tighten every time. I'd tell her that every child is loved by someone, even if that love gets lost in the world. She'd nod, but I could tell she didn't believe it. I wanted to tell her I loved her enough for all the years she'd been unloved, but the words never came out. Sometimes love is too heavy to put into words. She started keeping a small notebook, questions she wanted to answer about her past. She never showed it to me, but I'd see her writing in it late at night, her face serious, her pen moving fast. I didn't stop her. Everyone needs to know where they come from. But each page she filled seemed to bring a distance between us that I couldn't name. I could feel her slipping into a search that would lead her somewhere I couldn't follow. One day, she found an old box of mine in the attic. It was full of old photos, papers, and letters from my past. She asked if she could look through them. I said yes, thinking it would be harmless. She spent hours there, sitting on the floor, flipping through the pictures, asking small things: who this person was, where this place was. She pointed to a few old pictures of my son and asked if he still visited. I froze for a moment, but said calmly that we had lost touch. I didn't tell her the truth. I didn't tell her that my son had left me years ago, that he had thrown me out like a stranger. I didn't tell her that the pain of losing him still lived in me like an open wound. She didn't need that weight. But life doesn't hide its truths forever. Every time she looked at my son's face in those pictures, she'd stare a little longer. Once, she said he looked familiar. I laughed it off, told her all faces start to look the same after a while. But inside, I felt something twist. A deep, strange unease I couldn't understand. I tried to push it away, but it stayed. Weeks passed, and her questions became heavier. Why do I feel like I've seen him before? Why do I dream about a woman with long dark hair and a baby? Her words started to haunt me. I didn't know what to say anymore. Every time she asked, I would feel the air leave my chest. I'd change the subject, tell her we'd talk later. But inside, I was afraid. Afraid that the truth was closer than either of us knew. She talked to people at the shelter, asked about her records, her background, anything they could tell her. Most of the files were missing or unclear. The staff said she had been left at the gate one night with a small blanket and a note that just said her first name. No one had ever come back for her. She looked heartbroken when she heard that. I tried to comfort her, but her eyes stayed fixed on the ground, empty and lost. Just like the day I first met her. After that, she became quieter. Not distant, just thoughtful. She spent hours in her room, sorting through old boxes, photos, papers, anything that might hold a clue. I told myself she was just curious, that it was normal. But I could feel it. Something was coming. A truth I wasn't ready for. Something buried deep in time was about to crawl back to life. She stopped calling me Dad for a few days. It hurt more than I can explain. Not because I thought she loved me less, but because I could tell her heart was confused. She didn't know who she was, and until she did, she couldn't know who I was to her. I wanted to protect her from the pain of knowing too much. But you can't protect someone from the truth forever. I remember one night she looked at me across the dinner table and said, "Do you think the past always finds us?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just nodded. She smiled a small, sad smile and said, "Then I guess it's already on its way." I didn't understand what she meant at the time. But the next day, I would. And it would change everything. It was a quiet morning that turned into the day my whole world collapsed. The sky outside was pale, and the air smelled like rain that hadn't yet fallen. I remember I was sitting in my chair by the window, reading the newspaper, sipping my tea like always. The house was still, peaceful, warm, the kind of calm that comes before something breaks. She was in her room, cleaning, I think. I could hear drawers opening, boxes being moved. I didn't pay much attention. She was always organizing things, trying to make everything neat. Then, after a long silence, I heard her footsteps coming down the hallway. Slow, uneven, heavy. Something in me felt it before I saw it. I looked up, and she was standing in the doorway, pale, shaking, holding something in her hand. Her eyes were wide, her lips trembling. She looked like she'd just seen a ghost. I asked if she was all right, but she didn't answer. She just stood there, staring at me, holding that old photograph. Her hand shook as if the picture itself burned her skin. Finally, she walked closer, her steps uncertain, her voice so low I almost didn't hear it. "I think I found something," she said. Those words, so simple, meant nothing then. But they were the beginning of everything falling apart. She came to me and handed me the photo. It was worn out, edges bent, colors fading with time. I took it from her, not thinking much, expecting it to be one of my old pictures from the attic. I even smiled a little, ready to tell her a story about the past. But when my eyes met that photograph, the blood in my body seemed to stop moving. My hands froze. The air in my lungs disappeared. My heart hit hard against my ribs and then seemed to stop. I couldn't breathe. It was a picture of two young people, a man and a woman, standing close together, smiling, holding a small baby wrapped in a white blanket. The man was my son. My only son. The same son who had thrown me out of his life, the same face that I had tried so hard to forget. His arm was around the woman, and the way they looked at that baby. I knew it was theirs. The woman, I recognized her too. She was my son's old girlfriend. She had disappeared years ago, long before everything went wrong. No one knew where she went. I hadn't thought of her in years. But there she was, frozen in that photograph, holding the baby I had never met. I stared at the picture, my fingers shaking so hard that the photo almost slipped from my grasp. My eyes kept going back to the baby's face. I didn't want to believe what I already knew. The small round cheeks, the eyes, the way the baby smiled. It was her. It was the girl standing in front of me. The girl I had raised, loved, protected, called my daughter. She was the child my son had hidden from me. My head started spinning. The room felt smaller. My vision blurred. I looked up at her, and she was crying. Silent tears, falling one after another. She said nothing, but she didn't have to. I could see it in her face. She knew. She had already put the pieces together. My heart felt like it was being torn apart. Everything inside me, love, anger, shock, grief, all mixed into something I couldn't name. I wanted to speak, but no words came out. My mouth opened, but my voice was gone. I looked back at the photo, hoping somehow I was wrong, that it wasn't real. But the faces didn't lie. My son's eyes, that woman's smile, the baby's face, her face, my granddaughter. All this time, she had been right in front of me. All those years I thought I was giving an orphan a home. I had been raising the very blood my son stole from me. My knees went weak. I felt my body grow cold. The teacup slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. The sound echoed through the house like thunder. She rushed to help me, but I couldn't move. I sank into the chair, staring at the picture that had destroyed every wall I'd built to protect myself. Everything made sense now. The way she smiled, the way she looked at me, the strange familiarity that I could never explain. It wasn't coincidence. It was blood. It was her. I sat there for hours, holding that picture, unable to let go. She sat beside me, quiet, crying, saying nothing. I could feel her trembling, but I couldn't comfort her. I couldn't even comfort myself. My whole life, the pain, the loss, the years of loneliness, all of it led back to this moment, to this truth. The girl I had saved from loneliness had saved me too. But the same girl was also the living proof of the greatest betrayal of my life. A secret my own son had buried deep, thinking I'd never find it. I couldn't take my eyes off that photo. It felt like the world had stopped spinning, like everything I had believed in for the last 10 years had just turned into dust in my hands. I looked at the man in the picture, my son. His arm around that young woman, both smiling at the camera like they had all the happiness in the world. He looked proud, alive, full of life. I remembered that face, but not that smile. That smile belonged to a time before everything went wrong, before pride and greed poisoned him. My son. The boy I had raised with love and discipline, the man who had thrown me away. He was there, in that photo, holding a baby I never knew existed. My blood, my granddaughter. The woman beside him, her smile soft, her eyes kind. I remembered her too. She used to visit our home years ago when my son was younger. They were in love once, and I remember thinking she was good for him, but then one day she was gone. He said they broke up. He said she had left him. I didn't ask questions. I thought it was just another story of two people who didn't work out. I didn't know she had been carrying his child. I didn't know he had turned his back not just on me, but on his own flesh and blood. As I stared at that baby in the photograph, everything started connecting in cruel, quiet pieces. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, the small dimple that appeared when she laughed. All the things I had felt familiar about her. They weren't coincidence. They were family. My family. My heart began to ache so hard it felt like it would split in two. My hands trembled as I traced the baby's face on the photo. I wanted to hold her again. Not the baby in the picture, but the girl she had become, the girl standing right in front of me. But my body couldn't move. My chest felt heavy, my mind spinning between disbelief and grief. I had loved her like a father. Every meal, every birthday, every small victory. She was my joy, my reason to live. And now I knew she wasn't just a part of my heart. She was a part of my blood. My own granddaughter, abandoned to a shelter, growing up thinking no one wanted her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why. Why had my son done this? Why had he buried this truth? Why had he taken from me the only light left in my life? She stood beside me, quiet, her tears falling. I could tell she didn't know how to speak either. She was just as broken as I was. For years, she had searched for the truth about her parents, and now she had found it. But the truth wasn't kindness. It was cruelty, wrapped in family. Her hands trembled as she looked at me. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I could manage was to clutch that photo tighter, as if I could squeeze answers out of it. Memories of my son came rushing back. The boy who used to sit on my shoulders, the teenager who used to make promises, the man who once said he'd make me proud. How did that boy turn into the man who could hide a child, his own child, and let her grow up as an orphan? What kind of darkness had grown inside him? It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was cruelty. Cruelty I could never have imagined. I thought of all the nights she cried in her sleep when she first came to me, all the times she said she felt like no one in the world wanted her. She had looked at me for comfort, and I had told her that she mattered, that she was loved. And all along, she was my own flesh and blood. My granddaughter calling me Dad, while I had no idea. The thought broke something inside me that will never heal. I felt my knees weaken. The photo slipped from my hand and fell to the floor, face up, staring back at me like a mirror of everything I had lost. I dropped to my knees, not because of pain in my body, but because of the weight of that truth. I pressed my hands to my face and cried. Deep, hard, shaking cries that came from the years of silence, the years of betrayal, the years of loneliness that all led to this moment. She knelt beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder. I could feel her shaking too. We were two broken souls bound by the same man, one who had abandoned both of us. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, the world quieter. I looked at her face through my tears and saw both my past and my future staring back at me. I picked up the photograph again. It was just a piece of paper, but it carried a lifetime of lies. The faces smiled up at me, my son, his lost love, and the baby they never told me about. The baby who grew up believing she had no one. The baby who had unknowingly saved me from my own emptiness. I wiped the tears from my face, but more came. I had found my granddaughter, but at the same time, I had lost my son forever. I sat there on the floor, holding that photo, my heart breaking over and over again. My hands shook so badly that I could barely keep the picture steady. The room felt like it was spinning, the air thick, the silence louder than any scream. My granddaughter, the little girl I had rescued from loneliness, the one I had fed, taught, and loved, was my son's child. The truth was so heavy I could hardly breathe. I looked up at her, and she was staring at me with red, swollen eyes. Tears ran down her cheeks, and her lips trembled. She wasn't just a frightened child anymore. She was a girl whose whole life had just changed, and I was part of the reason why. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice cracked before the words came out. When she finally managed to talk, her voice was soft, broken, full of pain. She said he had told her never to find me. Those words hit harder than any blow I had ever taken. My body froze. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My son, my blood, had told his daughter, my granddaughter, to stay away from me, to erase me, to make sure I never knew she existed. It felt like a knife twisting deep in my chest. I didn't understand at first. I didn't want to. I wanted to believe there was a reason, some explanation, anything that made sense. Maybe he thought I wouldn't forgive him. Maybe he was ashamed. But no excuse could make this right. He didn't just abandon me, he erased me. He erased himself from her life, erased love, erased truth. And he had left this innocent girl to carry the weight of his choices. I tried to speak, but my voice came out rough, trembling. I asked how she found the photo, and she said she had gone back to the shelter records, trying to learn where she came from. A staff member had mentioned that a woman once left her there in the middle of the night, crying, saying she had no choice. That woman, she realized now, was her mother, the same woman in the picture. Before leaving, her mother had said one last thing to the shelter worker. "Don't let her go near him." That him was me, my own son. My mind couldn't hold the pain. I felt it breaking, piece by piece, as every memory I had of my son began to twist into something dark and cruel. I remembered his anger, his pride, his eyes when he told me I was no longer welcome in my own home. Now I could see that the same anger that pushed me away had also destroyed his own family. He had punished me not just by turning me out, but by taking away my granddaughter too. He didn't just hate me, he wanted to erase me completely. I looked at her, and she looked back, our tears mixing in silence. There were no words that could heal what had been done. I wanted to comfort her, but how could I? How could I tell her that the man she'd spent her whole life wondering about, the father she had imagined, hoped for, was the same man who had thrown away both of us? I wanted to protect her from that truth, but it was too late. She already knew. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve and whispered that she didn't blame me. She said she just needed to know why. Why would a father do that? Why would a man choose pride over family? I had no answer. I had asked myself the same question for years. I told her that sometimes people destroy the ones they should love the most because they can't face themselves. She nodded, but the pain in her face didn't fade. I picked up the photo again. My fingers ran over the image like it was alive. My son's smile burned into my mind, a smile that once brought me pride, now only shame. I remembered the day he was born, how I held him in my arms and swore I'd never let the world hurt him. I had raised him to be strong, honest, kind. But somewhere along the way, he had lost all of that. Somewhere, he had turned into someone I no longer recognized. And now, that same darkness had reached the only good thing left of him. This girl, this innocent child, who had done nothing but search for love. My knees finally gave out, and I fell to the floor, still clutching that photo. My tears hit the paper, smudging the faded ink. I didn't care. The truth had already stained everything. My chest hurt with every breath. my head spinning with memories of the past and the sharpness of this new reality. The room felt colder, the air heavier. I wanted to scream his name, to ask why, to curse him, to forgive him, all at once. But I stayed silent. She knelt beside me and put her arms around me. We cried together, grandfather and granddaughter, strangers and family at the same time. The truth had broken us both, but in that moment, it also bound us together forever. The night after that truth came out, I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair, the photo still on the table in front of me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. My son's face, that woman's soft smile, the small baby in their arms. The baby who grew up to become the only person who had given my old life meaning again. I kept asking myself how I didn't see it sooner. How did I not recognize her? How could I not feel it? The way she smiled, the way she laughed, even the way she frowned when she was thinking. They weren't just familiar because of some memory. They were his, my son's, my blood. She had carried his face and her mother's heart this entire time, and I had been too blind to see it. Every little thing she had done over the years came back to me now in flashes. The way she folded her hands before eating, the way she hummed when she was scared, the way she looked at me when she wanted to make sure I wasn't sad. I had seen all those things before in my son when he was small. But back then, I had dismissed it as coincidence, as nostalgia playing tricks on my tired mind. Now I knew better. It was blood calling to blood. The pain of realization is not sharp. It's slow. It spreads. It doesn't strike like lightning. It seeps like poison. That night, it crawled through every part of me, quiet but cruel. I looked around my small living room, the books we read together, the drawings she made for me, the photos we took every birthday. And all of it changed meaning in an instant. What I once saw as kindness now looked like destiny. What I thought was chance was actually fate dragging me toward this truth, step by painful step. I cried, not because I was angry at her, but because I was angry at myself. For years, I had blamed life, fate, and age for what I had lost. But now I realized my loss had been sitting across from me every day, smiling, laughing, calling me dad. I had missed so many years of her life, all because of my son's pride and cruelty. He had robbed her of a family, and he had robbed me of her childhood. We could have been together from the beginning. We could have shared birthdays, holidays, ordinary days filled with love. But instead, both of us had lived in loneliness, her in a shelter, me in silence, while the truth hid between us, unseen. As dawn broke, I watched her sleeping on the couch, her face calm despite everything that had happened. I saw her features clearly in the early light, the same eyes as my son, the same mouth, but softer, gentler. She looked peaceful, and I realized something that tore me apart. She was the best part of him. She was what he could have been if he hadn't lost himself to anger and greed. She was proof that even from something cruel, something pure could still be born. I sat there for hours, just watching her breathe. I wanted to hate my son for what he had done, but looking at her made it impossible. She was my reason to keep living. She had given me hope without even knowing it. I thought about all the times I had held her hand when she was afraid, all the times she had leaned on me when she felt alone. We had already been family long before we knew it. Blood had only confirmed what our hearts had already decided. But even with that comfort came a deep, painful ache, the weight of everything lost. I thought of the years I could have spent with her as a baby, holding her, telling her stories, watching her grow. I thought of the empty birthdays she must have had, the tears she must have cried alone at night, thinking no one cared. And I thought of my son, not the man he became, but the boy I once knew. I had loved him more than my own life. I had forgiven him everything, even when he turned his back on me. But this, hiding his own child, my granddaughter, this was something I could never understand. When she woke up that morning, she looked at me with tired eyes and said she was sorry. Sorry for finding the photo, sorry for bringing up the past. I told her she had nothing to be sorry for. Truth should never be buried. She smiled faintly then, and I realized she was stronger than I had ever been. She had faced her pain head-on, while I had spent years running from mine. I reached out and took her hand, and for the first time, I felt a strange kind of peace. The pain was still there, but beneath it, there was something else. Purpose. Maybe fate had separated us so that when we finally found each other, we could heal together. Maybe the years weren't wasted, only waiting. As she rested her head on my shoulder, I closed my eyes and made myself a promise. I would never let her feel unwanted again. She had been abandoned once, and that would never happen under my watch. I couldn't change what my son had done, but I could give her what he had taken away: love, safety, family. The realization had shattered me, but it also rebuilt me. I wasn't just her guardian anymore. I was her grandfather, and that truth, though it broke my heart, gave me something stronger than pain. It gave me a reason to keep living. That night after she went to sleep, I sat alone in the dark. The only sound in the house was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. I stared at the photo one more time, the faces frozen in that small piece of paper. My son, smiling like a man who thought he had his whole life figured out. The woman beside him, eyes gentle, proud, holding the baby like she was holding the future. I touched the image of that baby, her tiny face, her bright eyes, and I broke again. I cried like a child. I cried for the years I had lost, for the love that was stolen from both of us, for the cruelty that came from my own blood. Every tear that fell carried a memory. The night my son told me to leave his house, the day I found myself sleeping on a cold bench, the years I spent trying to forgive him. I had believed life had already taken everything from me back then, but now I realized it had taken even more. It had taken her. She had been out there all this time, alone, while I sat in my empty home, thinking there was nothing left for me. And all that time, my son knew. He knew and said nothing. That thought burned in my chest like fire. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream, to curse his name, to tear that photo apart. But when I tried, my hands wouldn't move. My heart still remembered the boy he once was. The boy who used to laugh in this same house, who used to run to me when he was scared, who used to call me Dad. How do you hate someone you once loved more than yourself? I had forgiven him before for cruelty, but this was something deeper. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. He had stolen years from me, from her, from both of us. Years that could never be returned. The pain sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't lift. I thought about every birthday she spent in that shelter, waiting for someone who never came. I thought about the nights she must have cried alone, wondering if she had done something wrong, wondering why her parents didn't want her. She had carried a pain my son gave her, a pain that was never hers to bear. And yet, despite it all, she grew up kind, gentle, full of light. She didn't become bitter. She didn't turn cruel. She became everything good that was left of our family. And I realized then that she had already forgiven him in a way I never could. As the hours passed, my mind filled with old memories. I saw my son's face the day he was born, the first time he said "Father," the first time I held him after my wife died. I had done everything for him. I had worked until my body broke to give him a good life. And this was what he left behind, a legacy of pain and secrets. My tears turned silent then. I wasn't crying for myself anymore. I was crying for the man my son could have been and never became. I was crying for the child he abandoned and the father he betrayed. I don't know how long I sat there. The night stretched endlessly. The air was heavy, still, cold. I kept thinking about the years I could have spent with her, teaching her to walk, to talk, to ride a bike. I imagined her small hands holding mine, the birthdays I missed, the hugs that never happened. It was too much. My chest hurt, my head pounded, and all I could do was whisper her name over and over like a prayer. When morning came, I felt empty. My eyes burned from crying, but my tears were gone. She came into the room, eyes puffy, face pale. She looked like she hadn't slept either. When she saw me, she didn't speak. She just came close and hugged me tight. For a moment, I felt something inside me loosen. The pain, the anger, the regret. All of it fading, if only for that moment. I held her back and whispered that everything was going to be okay, even though I didn't believe it myself. Later, I walked to the window and looked outside. The sun was rising, pale and weak, like a wounded sky. The light fell on the framed photo on the table. I thought about taking it down, about putting it away somewhere I'd never have to see it again. But I didn't. I left it there, not as a wound, but as a reminder of truth, of loss, of the things we carry whether we want to or not. Love and betrayal now shared the same face. My son had destroyed me twice, once when he threw me out, and again when I found the child he abandoned. But even in his destruction, life had given me something beautiful back. That girl, my granddaughter, the only pure thing left from a broken bloodline. I knew then that I couldn't let the past decide our future. The truth had hurt us, but it had also given us something real. Each other. I had lost my son, but I had gained something greater than forgiveness. I had gained a second chance at family, and I swore to myself that I would never let her feel unwanted again. That night, after the storm of truth had settled into silence, I walked into her room. She was asleep, her face calm, her hand resting on the same photo that had broken our hearts. The moonlight came through the window, touching her face gently, and I stood there watching her for a long time. I could still see traces of him in her, the shape of her eyes, the way her hair curled at the edges. But I also saw something he never had. Kindness, innocence, strength. She had his blood, yes, but she had my heart. I walked closer, picked up the photo from beside her, and looked at it one last time. Then I wiped the tears that had dried on its surface, found an old frame in the closet, and placed it beside her bed. She had lost everything once. I wanted her to know she would never lose me. I whispered to the quiet room, "You found me, and that's enough." The words came out broken, but real. The truth had destroyed my past, but it had given me something far more precious, a reason to keep going. I had spent years believing my life was over, that my story had already ended in pain and silence. But that little girl, my granddaughter, had rewritten the ending without even knowing it. I thought I had saved her, but it was she who had saved me. The next morning, I made breakfast like nothing had happened. She came into the kitchen slowly, her eyes still swollen from crying. She sat at the table and looked at me quietly. I could tell she didn't know how to act anymore, whether to call me Dad, Grandpa, or nothing at all. I smiled at her and poured her tea. I didn't care what she called me. All I cared about was that she was there, sitting in front of me, alive, safe, mine. For days we didn't talk about the photo. We didn't need to. The silence between us said everything. Sometimes she'd sit beside me, resting her head on my shoulder, and I'd feel her sigh, not out of sadness, but relief. The truth had hurt, but it had also freed her. She knew who she was now, where she came from, and why she had always felt that strange pull toward me. She belonged finally. And so did I. Weeks passed, and I started noticing small changes in her. She smiled more often now, not because life was perfect, but because it was honest. She began visiting the shelter again, talking to the children, bringing them small gifts like I once did for her. When I asked why, she said she didn't want any child to feel forgotten like she once did. Her strength amazed me. Even after everything she had been through, the abandonment, the loneliness, the truth, she still chose kindness. That was when I realized something important. She hadn't inherited her father's cruelty. She had inherited her mother's heart. Sometimes when I sat in the garden watching her water the flowers, I'd think about my son. I tried to hate him, but the anger always turned into sorrow. Maybe one day he would realize what he'd done. Maybe one day he'd come back, looking for forgiveness. But even if that day never came, I had already found peace. I had stopped waiting for him. My heart had found its new home. Every night before bed, I'd walk into her room, look at the framed photo beside her bed, and whisper a quiet prayer. Not for my son, but for her. For strength. For happiness. For a life that wouldn't repeat the same mistakes that had broken ours. She was my second chance, the proof that even from betrayal, love can be born again. I never thought I'd live to see something good rise out of so much pain, but there she was, living proof that light still finds its way through darkness. One evening, she came to me while I was sitting outside and wrapped her arms around me from behind. She didn't say anything, and she didn't need to. That single moment said everything. She had chosen me, and I had chosen her. Blood didn't make that choice. Love did. I looked up at the sky and whispered to my wife, wherever she was, that I had finally kept my promise. Our family wasn't gone. It was just smaller, quieter, but still alive. The house that once held only silence now carried laughter again. The walls that had witnessed years of pain now held peace. I knew life would never be the same, but maybe that was okay. Some truths break you to rebuild you better. The photo that made me fall to my knees had also made me stand taller than ever before. I had lost my son, but I had gained something far greater, redemption through love. And as the night fell, I looked at her sleeping face one last time and thought, maybe this was how it was always meant to be. She was never just a girl I rescued. She was the family I was meant to find. The past had taken everything from me, but it had also led me right to her. And that, after all the years of pain, was enough.